The old road sign was barely legible, splintered wood covered in moss. Welcome to Havenwood, it probably once said. Now, it just felt like a warning. I was lost, my GPS had died hours ago, and a storm was rolling in fast. Havenwood looked like my only option for shelter. It was one of those places you see in postcards from a forgotten era. Quaint houses with wraparound porches, a general store with a faded Coca-Cola sign, a single church steeple piercing the bruised, purple sky. But as I drove down Main Street, a feeling of unease crawled up my spine. There were no people, not a single soul. No cars, no kids playing in yards, no one rocking on the porches. Just an unnerving, heavy silence broken only by the wind whistling through the eaves of the houses. I parked in front of the general store, the bell above the door chiming with a hollow sound as I stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light cutting through the grimy windows. The shelves were stocked, but everything was coated in a thick layer of dust, as if frozen in time. Canned goods from decades ago, candy bars with faded wrappers. Hello, my voice echoed, sounding small and frail. No answer. I walked deeper into the store, my footsteps creaking on the old floorboards. Behind the counter, I saw it. A ledger, open to a recent date. Just yesterday's date, in fact. The handwriting was a neat, looping script. The entry read, New arrival. 1. My blood ran cold. Was it talking about me? How could they know? Suddenly, the bell above the door chimed again. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. Standing in the doorway was a tall, thin man in an old-fashioned suit. His face was pale, his eyes dark and empty. He didn't smile. He just stared. You're lost, he said, his voice a dry whisper, like rustling leaves. It wasn't a question. We've been expecting you. Expecting me? The fear was a physical thing now, a tight knot in my stomach. Who are you? I stammered, backing away slowly. I'm the greeter, he said, taking a slow step forward. Everyone in Havenwood has a role. And soon, you will too. The other residents began to emerge from the shadows of the store, their faces just as pale, their eyes just as empty. They moved with a strange, jerky slowness, surrounding me. There was the baker, still in his flour-dusted apron. The librarian, her glasses perched on her nose. The sheriff, his badge tarnished. They weren't alive. Not really. They were like puppets, their strings pulled by some unseen force that permeated this town. The greeter's lips curved into a semblance of a smile. Don't be afraid, he whispered, his voice now sounding like it was coming from all around me. You won't be leaving. But you won't be alone, either. We're a tight-knit community here in Havenwood. We always have room for one more. I looked at the open ledger on the counter. The neat script. New arrival. 1. I finally understood. This wasn't a shelter from the storm. It was the storm's very heart. And I had just driven right into it. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence of Havenwood, a town that collects souls instead of people. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the darkness. It started with the roses. A single, perfect red rose left on my doorstep every morning. At first, I thought it was a secret admirer, someone from work maybe. It was kind of sweet, romantic even. I'd pick it up, smile, and put it in a vase on my kitchen counter. After a week, I had a whole bouquet. But then things started to change. One morning, instead of a rose, there was a small, intricately carved wooden bird. It was beautiful, but unsettling. There was no note, just the bird, its painted eyes seeming to follow me. The next day, it was a photograph. A picture of me, sleeping in my bed. My blood ran cold. How did they get in? I checked all the locks, the windows, everything was secure. I felt a knot of pure dread tighten in my stomach. This wasn't romantic anymore. This was a violation. I went to the police, but they were dismissive. Maybe you have a stalker, but without a direct threat, there's not much we can do, they said. They told me to be more careful, to change my locks. So I did. I installed a new deadbolt, a chain, even a security camera pointed at my front door. For a few days, nothing happened. The morning deliveries stopped. I started to breathe a little easier, thinking maybe I had scared them off. I was so wrong. The packages started coming to my office instead. A box of my favorite, very specific brand of tea. A book from an obscure author I'd mentioned to a friend just once, weeks ago. It was clear they were listening, not just watching. My world started to shrink. I stopped talking to friends on the phone. I'd jump at every little sound outside my apartment. The feeling of being constantly watched, of my private life being dissected by an unseen predator, was suffocating. One night, I was jolted awake by a notification on my phone. It was from my security camera. The app opened to a live feed of my front door. And there, standing on my porch, was a figure. They were dressed all in black, their face obscured by a deep hood. They weren't trying to get in. They were just standing there, perfectly still, looking directly at the camera. And then, slowly, they raised a hand and waved. It wasn't a friendly wave. It was a wave of ownership. A wave that said, "I see you. I know you're watching me watch you." I unplugged the camera. I didn't want to see anymore, but I knew they were still out there. The next morning, there was no package. There was just a single, muddy footprint on my doormat. It was pointing away from the door, as if they had just left. But the terrifying part was, there was no matching print leading up to the door. It was as if they had appeared right on my doorstep. That's when I knew I couldn't stay. I packed a bag that night, just the essentials, and left everything else behind. I drove for hours, with no destination in mind, just trying to put as much distance as I could between myself and that house. I'm staying in a motel now, hundreds of miles away. I keep the curtains drawn, and I sleep with a chair wedged under the doorknob. This morning, I went to get some ice from the machine down the hall. When I came back to my room, something was propped against the door. It was a small, intricately carved wooden bird, and its painted eyes were staring right at me. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, or if it gave you the chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. It was just another Tuesday night, or so I thought. The office lights flickered off behind me, casting long, dancing shadows on the pavement as I started my usual walk home. The city hums differently after midnight. The daytime chaos melts away, leaving a quiet, almost eerie stillness. I usually enjoyed this walk. It was my time to decompress, to let the day's stress dissolve into the cool night air. But tonight, something felt off. The air was heavier, charged with an unseen energy. I pulled my jacket tighter, quickening my pace. The familiar rhythm of my footsteps on the concrete was usually comforting, but tonight, it sounded like an alarm bell in the silence. Then I heard it. A second set of footsteps. Scuff, drag. Scuff, drag. It was out of sync with my own, slow and deliberate. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Just an empty street bathed in the sickly orange glow of the streetlights. I told myself I was being paranoid, just tired from a long day. I picked up my pace. The footsteps behind me matched my speed, but kept their own unnerving rhythm. Scuff, drag. Scuff, drag. Closer now. A cold dread snaked its way up my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't dare look back again. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what was happening. Was it a prank? Someone trying to scare me? But the sound was so unnatural. It wasn't the sound of shoes on pavement. It was something else, something heavier, something wet. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I pretended to take a call, hoping the sound of my voice would deter whoever, or whatever, was behind me. "Hey, yeah, I'm just around the corner," I said, my voice trembling, trying to sound casual. The scuffing and dragging stopped. For a moment, a wave of relief washed over me. It worked. I was safe. I risked another look back. The street was still empty, but the silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise. Just as I started to breathe again, a shadow detached itself from a dark alleyway up ahead. It was tall, impossibly thin, and it moved with a disjointed, jerky motion, like a marionette with tangled strings. It wasn't walking. It was lurching, pulling one leg behind it with that same horrible scuff-drag sound. The streetlight caught its face for a split second, and my blood ran cold. It had no features, just a smooth, pale expanse of skin where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should have been. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The sound was trapped in my throat. My legs, which had felt like lead moments before, were suddenly filled with adrenaline. I turned and ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just ran. I sprinted through the labyrinth of side streets, my lungs burning, not daring to look back. I could still hear it, the scuffing and dragging echoing through the empty city, sometimes seeming miles away, other times right at my heels. I finally burst onto a busier main road, the headlights of passing cars a welcome sight. I stumbled into a 24-hour diner, collapsing into a booth, gasping for air. The waitress gave me a strange look, but brought a glass of water without a word. I sat there for hours, watching the street, until the sun came up and the city returned to its normal, noisy self. I've never walked home at night since. I take a cab, even if it's just a few blocks. Sometimes, when the night is too quiet, I can still hear it in the back of my mind. That slow, deliberate sound. Scuff, drag. And I wonder if it's still out there, walking the empty streets, looking for someone else who's walking home alone. Thanks for watching. If you have your own creepy late-night stories, share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange tales. Stay safe out there. They say curiosity killed the cat, but for me and my friends, it was the old St. Jude's Hospital on the edge of town. We'd heard the stories, of course. Whispers of a malevolent nurse who roamed the halls, of patients who never checked out. But we were young, reckless, and armed with flashlights and a misplaced sense of bravery. We thought it would be a thrill, a story to tell for years. We were wrong. The air inside was thick and heavy, smelling of decay and antiseptic. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing peeling paint, overturned gurneys, and medical charts scattered across the floor like dead leaves. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the broken windows, sent a shiver down my spine. We tried to laugh it off, making jokes about ghosts and ghouls, but the laughter died in our throats. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any sound. We decided to split up. A classic horror movie mistake, I know. I went with my friend Leo, heading towards the pediatric ward. The walls were covered in faded cartoon murals, their cheerful smiles now looking like grotesque grimaces in the dim light. In the center of the room sat a single rocking horse, swaying back and forth on its own. Slowly, rhythmically, we froze, our hearts pounding against our ribs. There was no wind in here, no draft. Leo, ever the skeptic, walked towards it to stop it. As his hand reached out, a child's giggle echoed from the end of the hall. It wasn't a happy sound. It was cold, and it was getting closer. We ran. We didn't look back. We sprinted down corridors that all looked the same, a disorienting maze of shadows and fear. We could hear footsteps behind us, not just the giggle anymore, but a heavy, dragging sound. The sound of a lame foot, scraping against the linoleum. It was the sound from the legends, the sound of Nurse Hemlock, the matron who supposedly took her own life in the asylum wing after a terrible accident. We finally found our other friends, huddled together in the main lobby, their faces pale with terror. They'd heard it too. The dragging footstep, the chilling giggle. We scrambled for the exit, the main doors we had pried open just an hour before. But they were shut, chained, from the inside. Panic set in. We pulled, we pushed, we screamed, but the chains held fast. Then we saw her. At the far end of the long lobby, a figure emerged from the darkness. A tall woman in a starched, old-fashioned nurse's uniform. Her face was obscured by shadows, but we could see the glint of something metallic in her hand. A syringe, long and sharp. The dragging sound grew louder as she moved towards us, one step at a time. The child's giggle erupted again, this time seeming to come from right beside her. I don't know how we got out. It's a blur of screaming and blind panic. One of us found a large window in a ground-floor office that was already shattered. We scrambled through, cutting ourselves on the glass, not caring about the pain, only about escaping that place. We ran and didn't stop until the silhouette of St. Jude's was a distant memory against the night sky. We never spoke of what happened again. We tried to forget, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear it. A slow, rhythmic rocking, a child's cold giggle, and a dragging footstep getting closer and closer. Some places should be left alone. Some doors should never be opened. Thanks for listening to my story. If you have your own chilling encounters, share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the dark. Stay safe out there.